at our last training session, I asked what kind of training you would like for next, and there was a request for training on how to import into APS. And so that's what we're going to show you today. And then, so I'm going to show you the basics of importing into APS. And then Greg is going to come up and he's going to tie what I show you into those of you that are or have been using the U-Attend to show how it all ties together with the time clock.
Oh, wow.
So it all fits and makes sense. So the what I want to point out first of all is the import. All it really is doing is bringing in data into the manual transaction entry. So if you can think of, remember that, it will help you if you are trying to create and come up with a new import process. Because think about what fields are that you have to key in. Well, you have to key in your employee ID, right? You have to key in the data item, and then you have to key in either the amount for if it's an hourly or a miles or something, the amount, or a fixed amount. You might key in a rate, or one of these fields here that you have to key in, or maybe multiple ones of these. Have you ever had to key in more than one of these fields in a manual entry? Yeah, okay. And so in your import file, it's going to be the same thing. We need to give it a employee ID. We need to give it a data item. Each record has got to have an employee ID. It's got to have a data item and at least one of these kinds of things. And then pay close attention to the names of these fields. Amount, fixed amount, rate, and those field names, because we're going to come back and we're going to see those again, okay? So try to pay close attention to that. So are you with me? And remember that the import is just going to fill this in as if you had manually filled them in.
Is it always one time, or do you have one time up there, or is it regular payroll?
It could be regular, it could be one time, it could be.
Right. If it's typical every month, we're just gonna do it regular payroll.
It could be whichever, but it's a way to get data in without having to key it in.
But you said it was always going to come in imported to manual.
It always goes into manual, and I'll show you. I'm actually using our test database. I'm going to have real live names, but the data is absolutely made up, fictitious, non-existing. I truly I made a file for importing to do AR deduction, and I made up a group of numbers, and then I copied those numbers down, about 5 numbers, and then I copied them down, and then I copied them down. They're made up. I want you to understand that there is nothing personal being shown other than people's names. They are real names, but you know who works here, so. The file that you need to create needs to be a comma delimited file. Now, you can do that in Excel. I'm going to open a file here. Here, if I can go to my desktop, I'll go to all files. And it's a delimited file, and it's a comma delimited. And this is the file that I created. The first field I put in are the employee IDs. Now, I put in a field that I don't need, but it's helpful for me to put the names in there. The file, that names are not going to do any good to the import.
It's only the ID number, is what you're saying.
Pardon?
Just the ID.
The ID number is crucial. But I've done something in here. I purposely made a mistake so that you can see how to fix a mistake. All right? And I think this will help. It'll also show you how the names are going to be useful. I put the names in there. I'm going to ignore the names when I actually do the mapping. They don't get in the way. So it's helpful for me as I do my work that I can keep myself straight, because I don't live in IDs. The computer lives in IDs. I live in people's names. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm sure you do the same thing for the most part. You know some people's IDs, but so
the name is not required for the entry. That's just for your convenience.
it makes it easier for me as I'm creating and as I'm error processing. That's right, it is not crucial. But it helps me as I'm doing the error processing and as I'm creating. So again, you remember in the manual entry, the fields that were required was the employee ID, the data item number, and that is 33012 is the data item number for AR deduction. Okay? So that's just straightforward. It's AR deduction. And then this is the amount that we're going to put into AR deduction for the person. And as you can see, truly, that's a set of numbers that I made up, and here's it's copied down again. So I want to point out that these numbers don't mean anything. All right? You with me? Once you've made this, and it's in Excel, you just can save it as a CSV file. You know how to save as a CSV, which is comma delimited. And then you just rename it to a TXT, because the APS requires that it have the extension TXT. So save it as a CSV, and then which will make it as a comma delimited, and then rename, take the CSV off and put it TXT. Once you've done that, you've done the hard part. Okay? Then we get into under Utilities, we go to File, Import, and this is the place where we do our import. And this goes back, I think, Andy, this is where you asked about whether it was one time or always. Well, you can choose whether it's one time, regular, or, you know, it could be whichever. The period, the payroll type, whether it's monthly or biweekly or et cetera. You choose the actual period that you're going to import into. You need to choose that it's going to be a new import. And notice it gave you 2 of the required fields. It gave you the employee enrollment and the data item, because all of the files are going to need those 2. Okay? What it doesn't know is which one of these other ones that you're going to be putting in. So under available columns, I'm putting in an actual dollar amount. Which one of those fields? Remember, I asked you to pay close attention to those fields on the manual entry. Which one of those fields use an actual dollar amount in your manual entry? The fixed amount field. Right. So I'll click on fixed amount, and here is the only thing you have to remember is after you've clicked on fixed amount here, is go up here and insert that column. And when I click on that insert column, it puts it down here into our list. So now we have our 3 fields that we're going to use. If you're going to use another field in there, you would just choose it and insert it in as well. But in our example for today, we have 3 fields, and that's all that are required. The 3 fields are: you must have an employee enrollment, the employee ID, and a data item. That's in all. And then you must have some kind of amount or calculation, or one of these fields here, and we have chosen the fixed amount. Okay. Once we've chosen our fields, we need to come down here and identify the fact that we're going to our file uses a separator, and what kind of separator does our file have? Comma. So we'll put a comma in there so that we've identified everything with that. And we've got to come up here and actually get our file. And up here we can open the source file. And I have it on my desktop. There is my file. I'll open it up. And there it is. Again, remember, the first column is my employee ID. Second column is names. Third column, the data item, and the fourth column is the amount. So now we come down here, and we'll click on employee enrollment, and that is in which column? It's in column 1, and we click on set, and you can see column 1, 500. Column 1, 500 is the first row. So we've set that and told it that column 1 has our employee enrollment. The data item is in which column? So I come down here and I click on column 3, and when I click on set, and you probably could get by without checking down here, but it has saved me because if the file has some issues, make sure that on this preview that you're getting what you think you should be getting. So the 33012, sure enough, that's exactly what I want. I think I should be getting, so that's good news. And then our fixed amount is in column 4. And I click on set. And I'm getting the 5 just like I think I should.
When would you use that decimal position?
Um,
Is that in case you don't have decimals in there?
it could be. I haven't.
It's 0 now.
Yeah, it would probably be if
If you would just keep the numbers in without a decimal,
then you could identify where the decimal should be.
When you import into AASI, you don't put decimals in, and it automatically puts them in, so it may be similar.
It could be. You could do it if but I have the decimals already in there, so it's taking it where they're at. All right, now I've identified the layout of the mapping, and I can actually do a preview of how it imports by clicking that, and it shows that the data items all came in, but it's missing an employee ID on one. I can say OK, and I go to this tab, preview, and you can see this one here did not come through. Let me go up here to the top and see which, because it's, see the pink? That pink one is the one that did not make it. And one of the reasons I like to put names in there is I can see that between the Espinosa and Harcum is a blank. That one failed. I can go back to my file and come down here to Espinosa and Harcum, and what is between the two?
but if you don't know,
Okay. And double check, and I know what the problem is because I purposely made an error. And if I look, this is 3265, and it should be 3264. Just so I can go into my file. If I can. And it's a good thing I had a couple people come in, and we'll go through it again here. Let me find my file real quick. I'll edit that file. All right. There's always a way to get around it. All right. So now, did you see how nicely it was, how easily it was for me to find the error, at least which one it was, but because I had the names in there. Because it was just between this name, and then I had to just figure out what was the problem, which I knew you may have to go back and track down what's wrong with that ID, which I just knew because I put the error in there just so you could see what it looks like when you have an error, because I didn't want you to come up with an error. I said, now what? But you get that pink line. You may get multiple pink lines, and just track them down one at a time. And if you have something like the names in there, it works real well. So let's pull in our import again, just real fast. We got a new. We'll put in our fixed field. We can put in our comma. We can open our source. The 2 is the one with the corrected name. Employee ID is column 1. Data item is column 3. Go ahead and shout it out. The fixed amount is column 4. And then I click on preview. It was complete successfully. And now if I go to the preview, the preview tab, yes, of course. And you can see all of them are there. It didn't error out. And then it's ready for me to, this hasn't imported yet. It's just all in a preview status. But now I can actually, then it's ready for me to do the import. And it will import into the October payroll into the one time, into the manual transaction, remember? So if I click on this button, it did it successfully. So now if I go to manual transaction, and pull up my data item, you see there is that AR deduction, just as if I had manually entered it. So does that make sense? And you see how the import just does it as if you have manually entered the work. So so if you create your file, you can create it in Excel, go through the process. You create your file in Excel, and what are the at least 3 fields required? The employee ID, the data item, and
What if it's an hourly instead of a fixed amount?
okay, then you wouldn't use fixed amount. You would, let's go back. Instead of fixed amount, you would use, it would be the manual entry. And then it would calculate because you have the rate already in there.
So it would pull the hourly number over.
So if you're using like a number of hours they've worked, you would use manual entry, and it would go into that first field, and then
So you'd say column 4, let's say.
would be manual entry, and then when you calculate, it would take this number times their rate. So there's some possibilities here with this import. Hopefully this gives you some ideas. Greg, I think I'm ready for you to. What I've done is shown you the basics of the import, and Greg is going to show you how that translates into those that are using the UAttend.
See, where this really comes in handy is when you can get a good report, say, from your time clock system. So this is where it's being used the most right now. Pennsylvania Conference, Chesapeake Conference, Spring Valley Academy all use UAttend software. And the great thing about UAttend is you get a nice report out of it. And so we took some steps and wrote a little access program that handles the conversion. This, as an example, is the file that UAttend spits out for us. Most of this information is unnecessary for our purposes. We don't use the employee name field. We use the employee.
What are you doing there to make those columns just fit the right size? Are you double clicking on that?
I'm just dragging it, clicking and dragging.
Oh, okay. I thought you were.
You know, what's important is that, is the employee payroll ID, because that's going to link up with the enrollment ID, and so if you set up something like UAttend, you have to make sure that the payroll ID, you know, the employee ID in that software lines up with your enrollment ID, otherwise you're gonna have all sorts of fun converting. But you can see this basic file. I've prepped the file a little bit because when you get the file, there's a few extra rows in it at the top and at the bottom. And so I just delete those rows so that all you have is the header and all the individual employee data. It's very straightforward.
How many employees are you importing now? That's an actual one of our months.
That is actually one of your months. Looks like we're at 146.
We have 275 employees in UAttend. So that just gives you guys the potential of how many timesheets we're importing instead of having to manually enter.
It makes a huge difference, even though nothing's ever perfect. And I'm gonna show you some areas where there are usually little complications, little things that you have to do manually. This takes care of the bulk of the work. Don't plan on it solving all your details. So you get the file so it looks like this, and you're done with it.
I don't see a data item number on there.
The data item number comes as part of the Access database. If you noticed in this file, you had the columns, for example, regular hours, overtime hours. The Access database takes it, and in the conversion, it translates those to the right data items. Now, where you run into further complications is that student hours is a different data item than regular hours. And so that kind of has to be dealt with. I will talk to you a little bit about that. And sometimes employees work under multiple departments under one enrollment, in which case you have to do some things. Again, we've got an exception table, though, in Access that's easy to modify for the handful of people where that comes up. And, what's that?
For new people that are starting now that might have multiple enrollments, we're actually setting up multiple users for them within UAttend.
If-
So we don't have this.
Yeah. If you set up multiple enrollments rather than multiple departments within an enrollment, it becomes a lot easier. But anyway, if you need to convert to first job hours or second job hours, the database provides a way to do that. Let me close the file again. And this is the database. This is what it looks like. The process you go through, you click Import UAttend. You click Export for APS. And guess what? You're done. Now you have this APS import file that looks very much like what Harold showed you, except it doesn't have the names in there. But you have the enrollment ID, you have the date item, and you have the number of hours. Just like that. In the case of Pennsylvania, they did things wisely with their enrollment IDs so that their students all fall in the 400,000 range, I believe. Is that right? And so it's not quite done yet, but I just need to modify this so that anyone in that 400,000 range gets the student hours data item automatically instead of regular hours. Some sites haven't done it that way. Their enrollment IDs are all over the place, in which case there's not much I can do for you on that. You just kind of have to manually deal with it. And that's kind of a shame. Make sure, try and be well organized with your enrollment IDs. It does help. It really does. And as I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that besides just regular hours, you have a number of other data items that are pulled out of those columns. I don't know what 10101 is right off the top of my head. But yeah, very likely. And and there is the holiday hours and such. That's really the process. I haven't touched this in a while, but here is where you create exceptions. Exceptions are created based on department, and so anytime there's a certain enrollment plus the matching department, it changes the regular hours to whatever date item is put in there.
Back to the main screen you had there, yeah, that one. You clicked import you attend, but you didn't select a file.
No,
How
and
do you know which file to select?
it's fixed. One of the ways that Access works, you can create an import, you can create an export, but the files are fixed, the file paths. And so on the computer, there is a folder you'll need to create called uattend, just like this. The file it imports is a CSV file called uattend import. You'll just rename the file you get to say that. The export file is APS import.txt.
Will you keep those every pay period?
That's up to you.
So if you do, you have to rename them again?
You'd need to rename them.
Okay, after you've done the import and export?
Yes. Yes. And there's been a time or two where someone came in and made some changes to this file, which will happen, certainly. And then after they made changes to the file, they came back to the Access database and they went through the process again. Well, they just overwrote the file, they overwrote the changes they made. So once you've got the file in this format, you don't have to worry about it. And make your changes, you save it, and now you can go directly to what Harold showed you. So it really is straightforward. To pull it off, what you need the uattend export file. If you have a different system, talk to me. We can work things out. As long as you can get a good file out of it, I can probably help you. I can't promise that it's going to be perfect, that it's going to do exactly what you want and handle all the details for you, but we can probably get the bulk of it in there and save you some work. Second thing that's very important is that the employee IDs in whatever software you use, whether it's uattend or whatever, the employee IDs must match the enrollment IDs. If that doesn't happen, I don't know how I can help you. It should be a pretty fixable problem, though. Student enrollment IDs should have a common range. If they don't, then you're going to have to use the exceptions table or just manually change it. That's, again, I can't help you automatically very easily with that. And then the other thing is use the standard date items. One site was using, I believe, the first job hours instead of regular hours. And so when someone's different, that complicates everything. And so it's good to be using the standard things, the same things that everyone else uses. Same thing if you're using regular hours instead of student hours for your students. Well, that probably won't complicate things much on our end, but please be consistent. So that's it. This shows you the process from getting the file from whatever software you're using and converting it into a format that APS can read. And we're happy to work with you to create something that's custom for you and for what you use.